And we're going to get him on right now because he's like, yeah. Ian Buchanan, ladies and gentlemen. What's up, Ian?
Wow, that's quite an introduction. And if you don't mind, I'll just sit here and just read my Wikipedia page aloud. Because I don't think I've actually seen it. Hi, guys. It's good to see you both. I miss seeing... I don't really miss anything, but there are some people I miss seeing around. I miss their energy and miss the fun, but the rest of it is like, whatever. Here we are.
Yeah. Well, at least we get to connect doing this, which is awesome.
Yes, exactly.
So was GH your first? Was that your first paid TV acting gig, or?
And I played I was on a show in New York called The Equalizer, but I did a guest start spot, and they didn't send me a script, and I went. It was shooting at night with Edward Woodward. I don't even remember. It was a series shot in the 80s in New York. One of the first
I remember The Equalizer.
The street. And I got there, and I was kind of like, very nervous. Of course, I didn't really know the. I kept saying, "What am I supposed to say?" And they're like, "No, it was basically we're not subtitling. You have this accent, it's ridiculous. So don't speak." So I was like, "So yeah, okay, but what happens?" And well, what happened was these guys came in and tied me up and gagged me and carried me, rolled me down the stairs and put me in the trunk of a car. And all I kept trying to say was, "I'm not a stuntman. I'm not a stuntman." You got the wrong person. I'm not a stuntman. And they're smacking me up the head like, "Shut up, shut up."
Oh, man.
So that was my first paid gig, and I still get residuals for that. And every time it comes in, I kind of kiss that check because I think you earned that. You earned that.
Wow.
Then the first was General Hospital was the first regular signed contract. Great, it was.
And they cast you out of New York?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
ABC then had, I think Emma Sands and I may have been the last two people on their, I think it was called the Talent Development or something, almost with like an old studio system thing they had where somebody from the network came to the Etcher studio and I did a showcase of something, and somebody from the network came and kind of like knew Gloria was looking for. Gloria Monty, who was the executive producer of General Hospital, was looking for somebody, and they called me in and put me on tape and signed me to whatever that thing was, and then she got the tape and flew me out, and I met her and Finola, and then moved out. So,
wow. So when they tape you, and then do they send it via Pony Express? Like, how do they send a tape to LA?
The tape was probably like...
Yeah, it was one of the big ones.
You got to rent a cargo plane to get it out there.
Yeah, it probably went by, I'm not sure, courier or so. I think they sent envelopes of like courier stuff, like backwards and forwards then.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm sure, I don't know how soon she would. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
Right. Well, so because VHS, this was in the
it was beta. It had to be beta, man.
Beta.
The tapes were like this big.
Beta.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And he's right. There was inter-office couriers. Yeah. So I don't know how it happened,
but inter-office from
because I know there's not a shoot. I know there's not a shoot from here to New York that you're going. But that's how they used to do it, though, because we used to get stuff from New York in our dressing rooms via inter-office mail.
Yeah, with the recycled, and they score out the name. And
totally.
And a little string you wrap around,
Yeah, wow, that's funny.
So, living in New York, were you excited to then move to LA, or was it like was your agent specifically looking for TV work for you? And because you said you didn't look into you didn't do a lot of theater work on. So were you not looking for that at all? Were you specifically looking for TV opportunities?
I had a manager who Jeremy Ritzer, who was part of Ritzer Fuhrer, who was one of the big casting companies from the 80s, I think late 70s, all through the 80s into the 90s. And he was kind of open just to anything, but it never crossed my mind that it would be soap opera. I had no understanding of what that genre was. I had done sort of everything that I'd done up to then, and it's like film-wise was very stylized commercials with a lot of pretty good commercial directors. So I really had no understanding or concept, and I didn't really know what I wanted. But I do remember signing like a 3-year contract and thinking like, I've never been anywhere for 3 years. This is just, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know. Like,
Sure.
It was kind of, that aspect of it was very daunting. But once I sort of got over the sheer terror of the memorization, and of course, like getting home at 8 o'clock at night in those days and go to work at 7 in the morning. By the time I got over that, I was, and got in a rhythm. I think I sort of realized that it was something that I adapted to it very quickly.
How did the way you would prepare material coming out of the Strasberg Institute, how did that translate to the amount of material that you had to prepare? Because that's a lot of work to do for 30 pages.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And of course, the thing that with not just Strasberg or any of that is, they don't care about the dialogue. They don't care about the script. They don't care. Like, you put a scene up, it's like they just want you just to be connected and just to be kind of like just to express or improvise, and you just necessarily to be presented with something that you had to do word for word was, and I had prepared different monologues for auditions and stuff, so I kind of I'd started that wonderful memorization muscle, which is that great thing that we have, that we have, and you never lose it unless you just don't use it. But we have it, and I was aware, I could use that very quickly, and I don't know. Once you get into it, I mean, it's and some days you have these, you have these. You just can't face another page. You can't face another word. You can't face. You can't face another, but not too many of those, thankfully.
That's what I was going to ask you, Ian. When you first came on, were you working 3, 4, 5 days a week when you first started your story, or did it kind of progress into that? And then was there a point, going back to what you just said, was there a point where you're like, when you're working 4 or 5 days a week doing all that memorizing, especially if you're doing any kind of method acting, it sure can take its toll on you.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of time where you were like, oh man, I'm a little burnt out, or maybe I need to go back to Spain?
Yeah. I think interestingly that I started doing like 3 or 4 episodes a week, but we only did 1 episode a day, and it was block, dress rehearsal, and then live to tape. But it wasn't live television, but it was basically live time. You went to tape at 4 o'clock, and you usually take, you tape for like 1 hour, or sometimes you'd go later, or but after 3 months, I think I kind of wished they would maybe just send me home. Because I hadn't adjusted to LA at all. The only thing I really had adjusted to was going to work and being at work and loving it and liking that. But that completely, I did get burned out. I mean, it was stamina. It was stamina and pacing and knowing that, but the thing is, I never wanted to ever just call it in. I never wanted to, just wing it. I never wanted. I remember one day we had prompters, and one day I just can't even memorize. I'm going to just read the prompters. I didn't know how to read a prompter, so I'm sort of reading.
I'm skill. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm reading I'm
like a tennis match here.
The guy holding the prompter bends down to tie his shoelace, and I bend down like. I was like, this is not going to work, and I had to promise myself that day, you will never do this again.
Yeah, that goes against everything you ever learned.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's like, yeah. And, pretty within, I think, my first year at General Hospital, I started working with Gary Shandling on the Next Door soundstage doing his sitcom. So that was kind of
At the same time?
At the same time.
Wow.
Yeah. I do GH in the morning.
So was that Sunset Gower then?
Yeah, Sunset Gower.
Sunset Gower. Okay.
Yeah, Days of Our Lives were there.
Yeah.
Married with Children, I think. We're just about to be there. I think Tony Danza's show was there.
Yeah, Who's the Boss? I did Who's the Boss there.
Yeah, Who's the Boss was there. Yeah. So I would leave GH and go do Shandling, and then come back and do GH. then run over, do another reading or something. So it was interesting and a lot of work, but it was
That's
fun.
pretty cool, though, huh?
Yeah.
What I mean, that sounds. I love our stage. Like, I love the fact that it's quiet, but boy, when you're on Paramount or at Fox or at a lot, like, there's something about that where, sometimes I think, maybe not when you were doing it when you started, but we feel a little over in the corner a little bit on soaps, right? And and being on a lot feels exciting.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Especially if you're working on 2 of the shows on it. Well done.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's like, as a kid, you see Hollywood, you see a Hollywood studio, and that's what Sunset Gower was, because you had everybody doing stuff. That's what kind of, CBS is over at B&B and Y&R, a lot of stuff going on. But
and also Sunset Gower had the Hollywood sign, like literally right above the
right there,
gate on Sunset. So it was definitely and interesting. I mean, 1986, when I came out to LA and started on General Hospital, there was a lot of old Hollywood still existed, which was pretty remarkable. And a lot of them kind of, I know a lot of them, several of the actors were in daytime and came to daytime. People who'd been major movie stars in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, like, were in daytime, which was really kind of remarkable. With those great stories, I mean, wonderful, like, just stories of old Hollywood, and you sort of take a break and step outside, and they tell you, like, wow, when I was doing a picture here with Clark Gable, and I remember, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So
but how cool was it? I mean, now looking back, how far ahead of his time Gary Shandling was.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude was so far ahead of his time to be doing that stuff in the 80s, man.
Yeah, I still even now, I kind of have days where I kind of think and have flashback, and even like Alan's Rebel has just brought a book out. Gary passed recently, and there's memorial and stuff, and a lot of recollective stuff, and people asking questions, and I still think just the relationship I had with him was extraordinary. He kind of mentored me in many ways, and would have had me do stand up every night someplace, but I was like, I can't be doing stand up and also stand up at 7 o'clock in the morning on a soap opera. So you've got to forget that idea. I'm like, I've got another life on television, way separate from yours. So like, let's kind of like, but he taught me a lot about comedy. I mean, a lot. He taught me like all the good stuff. He taught me like some of the things to avoid and stuff that, I just think it's remarkable when you have somebody like that who you have access to, who also is generous, and he was a phenomenally generous person. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we gotta spend more time with Ian, Steve, because Ian, we're doing these we're doing these comedy shows on the road, and we're amateurs at best. So you could probably give us some tips.
For sure, he can.
It's funny when you I mean, you kind of even but it's funny. Comedy's funny,
Yeah,
it's a different beast.
It's a different beast, and it's a whole.
Sure is.
What works one time will not work the next.
Sure. Well, we found that out quick.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing that Gary told me, which is so funny, because he imparted to me, because we were taping the show in front of an audience, and we do one version for Fox, I think, and one for cable, which I think it was one for HBO and one for Fox. So one was looser and a little more a little more sort of ribald, a little more kind of sort of raunchy. But if you were in the middle of a scene and I was about to have my joke, he'd sort of kick me, which the signal was, don't blow the joke. This isn't working. We'll start again. Don't blow it. Don't give it to the audience yet. We'll wait. So we had this kind of code. It was very interesting because he could feel it. He could feel the temperature. He could feel the tone. He knew it was either time to leap off or else it was time not to. Let's go back.
So what would you do? Would you say something else?
Yeah, I would flub it. I'd just flub it.
I'd see. You just kind of stop the scene.
What am I supposed to speak right now? is it?
I see.
Oh, is it me? Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. You just jump on the grenade for him, like.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, I mean,
it wasn't my show.
It's his
That's
show.
true.
His name on the show. It was like,
Sure.
Well, and ultimately he makes the decisions too, right? So there's not like a producer that's going to be like, well, this Ian guy never gets it right. Like, right? Gary had the final say?
His producers were all the Saturday Night Live people, and also the writers were the Joy Behar and the kids who went on to create The Simpsons and all of that stuff. So, and they were all like young writing kids. Yeah. So they were all kind of part of his circle. So he was, but they would rush in with rewrites and stuff and hand it to him, and he'd say, "No, give it to me," and I'd be like, "Oh, like okay, I'll take it." Like, no, so fun.
I'm fascinated. Like, going from where you started at Strasbourg to going to GH, and then jumping into a sitcom. Like, how did that come about? Just another audition that you just happened to nail? Like, or did you have a relationship?
No, I honestly, I left General Hospital one afternoon, was walking through the parking lot, I think with Shell Kepler, who played Nurse Amy.
Amy, yeah.
Yeah, and she was such a, vivacious, quirky little thing. And she said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it's Gary Shandling." And I was like, "Who's Gary Shandling?" And she said, "There." I said, I don't know who that is. She goes, "Oh, Gary." And Gary was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, I'm Shell. This is my friend Ian." So he was like, "Okay." So Gary looked at me and he said, "Are you funny?" I said, "How do you mean funny? Like funny for what?"
What part of town were you in?
Yeah, like what do you like, do I walk the way I walk, or like, because can you come and see me tomorrow? And I was like, I don't know who you are. Who are you? Because I've got a show, and I'd like if you can come like at 2:00, and maybe we'll read some stuff. And I went at 2:00, and it was a table read, and the character was called Ian McPfeiffer, and that was how
he was just looking for a Scottish person, and you happened to walk by.
I don't know what he was looking for. I never found out. I never found the answer to that. But the interesting thing was that from our initial encounter in the parking lot, that was the relationship of the characters. I was his best friend, who was a little simple. Very funny, because I didn't realize that at first, but I kept saying, "What? Let me ask you a question. Why does my character Ian always repeat himself?" And he was like, "Well, because he wants to be understood." I said, "So it's an accent thing?" And he said, "No, it's just it's just he wants to be understood." And I was like, "Oh, well, all right." But I would do things like, "Well, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea." And I'd be like, "Why would I say that twice?" But I did everything I said twice. So
that's funny.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was funny.
So the GH run was what, 3 years?
3 years, yeah. 3 years.
And then what was Gary Shandling? 2 years? Couple years?
I left after 3 years on GH. I went back to England to do the first revival of an old play called The Heiress. I did that in England for the summer, and then came back from that. I think I did a little GH, but mostly to do Shandling, and I came back to do a Columbo, which was like movie of the week, and then signed on Twin Peaks like immediately then. So I did Shandling into Twin Peaks, so that was kind of my.
That's awesome, man.
Comeback, yeah, and yeah.
So at that point, going from job to job, did that feel like I've never felt in a point besides feeling somewhat stable at GH for a couple of years where I was like, oh, I got this. But you were sounds like you were in a pretty good position. And in that time, going from one TV show, I'm going to go do a play over the summer, come back to the TV show. Well, yes. That must've been a pretty wonderful time.
It was, on reflection, I think it should have been more wonderful than it felt. I think it felt a little overwhelming. I think I would get kind of overwhelmed in I didn't feel quite as important as people wanted me to feel. And I personally didn't feel quite as interesting as people kind of said I should be. I was like, so I always felt like I had that actor thing, but I really had it. And I kind of really felt like they're going to catch me one of these days and just send me back to Scotland with nothing. These people are like going to be on to me in a second. They're going to say this accent thing is phony. This whole like, he doesn't know, like, what is he like? This acting. This, that's really how I felt, because every single day was such a different day, and it was a day of kind of learning stuff that was so completely new, learning on the fly, as we say. But it was basically experience. But I kept thinking, like, if I don't get this right, I'm done. I'm finished. I didn't feel as if I had so much behind me or support beneath me. I felt like I was, like one of those cartoon characters that stepped off a cliff and little feet were just running, and you kind of
right.
like